Good evening. This is a small extension to the bow tutorial walkthrough that I submitted earlier this week. There was a lot of really great feedback on it and response, and one of the commenters asked a very interesting question, which is, instead of using the mouse to control how much power the bow has, what if you wanted a key so you held it down and it would cause the tension to increase and then decrease? And so this is what I'm demoing today. That we have our player scene as before, except that rather than based off the distance of the mouse, the power increases and decreases on its own. So if you press it very quickly or release it too early, there's not much power, but release it just right and it will fly off. Oh, and yes, it will come back down and then it's gone back to 0. Am I recording? I am. Okay, cool. This has been updated on the GitHub release, so if you go to the link in the description, you'll see tutorial 1.1, and this is done as a new scene. So we still have our scenes in the previous tutorial, but now we've got swing bar. And this is how it works. Firstly, we've added a new scene variable, which is called swing amount, and we'll be using this to adjust our power programmatically. The first change you'll notice when you go into the events is, rather than using mouse clicks to draw an arrow or loose an arrow, we're using the space bar instead. So when you press space, we draw an arrow, and when the space bar is released, we loose an arrow. The biggest change is down here. Whereas previously we would change the power by looking at the distance between the player and the mouse, now what we're doing instead is we are adding to our scene variable power swing amount times by time delta. If you've never encountered time delta before, it can be a little confusing, but what it does in simplicity is it makes sure that some value that you're adding is the same across all devices. If we didn't use time delta, what this would do is swing amount would actually be greater on faster devices that had more frames per second, or updated could update faster, and actually be less on devices that only updated slower. And what timesing by time delta does is it smooths it out. And you want to do this whenever you've got some kind of value that is being added quite consistently, like frame by frame, such as here, power being held down, and you want it to stay the same across any environment or any scenario. If the computer runs fast, if it runs slow, you want it to stay the same. So what we do, just bringing it back to where we were, is when we're drawing our bow, we are constantly adding swing amount to power. So power starts at 0, we add swing amount, which is 10 a second. Well, what happens when we wanted to reach the top and go back? This is what happens here. If our power variable is at 11 or more, because it might run over by a tiny bit, and so just comparing exactly at 11 is a little difficult. Well, what we do is, instead of adding 10 every frame or every second, we want to subtract 10. And so what that will do is, we will start at 0, we will add all the way up to 11, and then we will start subtracting it. And as soon as we fall below 0, well then this will kick into place, and we will instead add 10. And so it's a constant bounce between these two. As soon as we go too high, we start taking away values from swing amount, and as soon as we go too low, we start adding it. Now, why have I done it as 0 and 11? The reason is that otherwise we weren't at maximum power for very long, basically. If I demonstrated by changing it to 10, as you would have expected, like, well, if we want our maximum power to be 10, that's what it should be. Apologies for that. So, as you can see, our maximum power is only available for the tiniest fraction of a second, which is maybe good if you've got, if it might be what you're interested in if you've got like a very high precision game. But I realized that I wouldn't have fun playing this, and I'd want the game to be a little nicer to me. And so what I've done is change it to 11. And what that means is, even though strictly speaking it means that the power can be slightly greater than before at the top end, it means that the max power is available just for a little bit longer, and makes it a little bit easier to get. Everything else remains the same in effect. I've only changed the power here so that the top power is about 600, just because that's what I wanted it. Anyway, thank you very much for your comments and suggestions, and keep them coming in. I will I find a lot of them very interesting, and I've got plans to try and make tutorials and walkthroughs on some of them. So keep up to date with that. Thank you very much, and see you on the next one.